The unexpected candidate. The crystalline spires of the Nexus Institute pierced the violet sky of Centauri Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 suns in a dazzling display that never failed to make Sarah Chen catch her breath. Even after 3 months of attending the most prestigious academic institution in the known galaxy, the 16-year-old quantum computing prodigy still couldn't quite believe she was here. Sarah adjusted her environmental suit's temperature controls as she hurried across the gravity-adjusted walkway. The institute's artificial atmosphere was optimized for the majority of its alien students, making it slightly too warm and oxygen-rich for human comfort. But that was the least of her concerns today. "Candidate Chen, you are precisely 43 seconds early," announced Professor Zixel, their crystalline form shimmering with patterns of blue and gold that indicated mild surprise. The Algorian's multifaceted eyes focused on Sarah with an intensity that would have made most humans uncomfortable. "Most unusual for your species." Sarah straightened her back, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I've learned that punctuality is relative, Professor, especially when dealing with quantum mechanics." A ripple of amusement passed through Zixel's crystalline structure. "Indeed. You continue to defy our expectations of human cognitive capabilities. Your solution to last week's 11-dimensional calculus problem was unexpected." Sarah had solved it while eating breakfast, sketching out the proof on her tablet between bites of synthesized toast. She'd learned early on that the key to surviving at Nexus wasn't just being smart. It was making it look effortless. "Please proceed to the examination chamber." Zixel gestured toward a doorway that hadn't existed moments before. "The council awaits." Sarah's heart rate spiked, but her face remained carefully neutral. The Council of Academic Excellence didn't summon students unless something extraordinary had happened, either extraordinarily good or extraordinarily bad. The chamber was a perfect sphere, its walls displaying a real-time visualization of the quantum fabric of space-time. 7 beings of various species sat in a semicircle before her, their forms ranging from vaguely humanoid to completely abstract collections of energy and matter. High Examiner Voss, a tall, elegantly proportioned being with silver skin and eyes like distant galaxies, spoke first. "Sarah Chen of Earth, your performance at this institution has been anomalous." Sarah's fingers twitched. In the 3 months since she'd arrived at Nexus, she'd learned that anomalous could mean anything from fascinating to threatening, depending on the context. "Your species has only achieved interstellar travel within the last decade," continued Voss. "Yet you have demonstrated problem-solving capabilities that rival our most advanced AI systems." Sarah looked at the stream of information surrounding her, her mind already starting to see patterns and possibilities that probably shouldn't exist. She smiled slightly, remembering something her grandmother used to say. "The best way to prove something's impossible is to go ahead and do it." She cracked her knuckles and got to work. The galaxy was about to learn an important lesson about underestimating human potential. The theory of everything. The holographic data swirling around Sarah wasn't just complex, it was alive. Equations twisted and morphed like living creatures, mathematical constants pulsed with their own heartbeats, and theoretical frameworks wove themselves into impossible geometries. This wasn't just a problem. It was an entirely new language of physics. Sarah's environmental suit beeped softly, adjusting its oxygen mixture as her breathing patterns changed. The council members remained motionless, their varied forms unified in their intense observation of the human before them. The only sound was the subtle hum of quantum processors working in the background, recording every aspect of her performance. The ultimum problema revealed itself layer by layer. It wasn't asking about the nature of reality. It was questioning the nature of nature itself. The equations described a universe where cause and effect were suggestions rather than laws, where probability wasn't just uncertain, but actively contradictory. "Interesting approach," murmured High Examiner Voss as Sarah began manipulating the holographic symbols, rearranging them into new patterns. "She's attempting to resolve the quantum gravitational paradox through. Is she using primitive Earth game theory?" Sarah ignored the commentary. She'd learned long ago that the best way to handle pressure was to turn it into focus. Her fingers danced through the holographic interface, pulling apart complex equations and reassembling them. But something wasn't right. The deeper she dug, the more she felt like she was missing something fundamental. 3 hours passed. The second sun had set, painting the chamber in deep purple light. Sarah had filled the air around her with calculations, proof attempts, and half-formed theories. To the council, it might have looked like chaos, but to her, it was a map of possibilities. Candidate Chen called out one of the council members, a being composed of pure energy. You appear to be approaching the problem from 17 different angles simultaneously. This is highly irregular. Sarah nodded absently, her mind still racing through calculations. Because looking at it from just one angle assumes we know which angle is correct. She paused, a thought striking her. Wait a minute. She stepped back, looking at her work with fresh eyes. The seemingly chaotic arrangement of equations and theories suddenly took on a new meaning. Oh, she whispered. Oh, that's clever. High Examiner Voss leaned forward slightly. You've identified something. Not exactly, Sarah said, beginning to pace. I've identified what I haven't identified, if that makes sense. This problem, it's not just testing our understanding of physics. It's testing our understanding of understanding. She turned to face the council, her eyes bright with realization. The paradox isn't in the equations, it's in our assumptions about what equations can do. We're trying to describe something that exists beyond description, aren't we? A ripple of what might have been approval or concern passed through the council members. Sarah pressed on, her confidence growing. Every approach I've tried assumes that mathematics is the fundamental language of the universe. But what if it's just one of many possible languages? What if our entire approach to physics is like trying to describe the taste of strawberries using only numbers? She turned back to her work, her hands moving with new purpose. The problem isn't asking for a solution. It's asking us to recognize the limitations of solutions themselves. As she spoke, she began clearing away equations, simplifying rather than complicating. We're not supposed to solve it. We're supposed to understand why it can't be solved within our current framework of understanding. The third sun was approaching the horizon, its red light casting long shadows through the chamber. Sarah's mind was operating on multiple levels now, seeing connections that existed beyond traditional logic. She wasn't just thinking about the problem. She was thinking about the problem. 2 minutes remaining, announced Voss. Sarah nodded, making her final adjustments to the holographic display. Where there had been chaos, there was now elegant simplicity. Instead of trying to solve the unsolvable, she had mapped the boundaries of solvability itself. Time, declared Voss as the third sun disappeared. Sarah stepped back from her work, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The chamber was silent as the council studied her final presentation. It wasn't a solution in any traditional sense. It was more like a map of why traditional solutions couldn't exist. Finally, High Examiner Voss spoke. In all our years of administering the ultimum problema, we have never seen an approach quite like this. Their silver skin rippled with complex patterns. You did not solve the problem. No, Sarah agreed. I proved why it couldn't be solved. At least not within the constraints of our current understanding of mathematics and physics. And I think that was the point. Explain, commanded the plasmaform council member. The universe isn't just stranger than we imagine, Sarah said, quoting JBS Haldane. It's stranger than we can imagine. But that doesn't mean we should stop trying to imagine. Our limitations aren't failures. They're signposts pointing toward new ways of thinking. The council members communicated silently among themselves for several long moments. Sarah waited, her heart pounding but her expression calm. She had either just made a breakthrough or a massive mistake, and she wasn't entirely sure which would be more dangerous. Candidate Chen, Voss finally announced, prepare yourself. What comes next will challenge more than just your intelligence. It will challenge everything you think you know about the nature of reality itself. Breaking the rules. The examination chamber transformed. The quantum visualization on the walls shifted, deepening into something that made Sarah's eyes water if she looked at it too directly. The council members' forms seemed to blur, as if they existed in multiple states simultaneously. What you are about to experience, High Examiner Voss announced, has never been attempted with a species at your level of development. Are you prepared to proceed? Sarah straightened her spine. Depends. Are you prepared for the possibility that our level of development isn't as simple as you think? A sound like crystalline wind chimes filled the chamber, alien laughter. Your confidence is remarkable, said the Plasmaform council member, considering you don't yet know what you're facing. Then enlighten me, Sarah replied, trying to ignore the way the floor seemed to be shifting beneath her feet. The air in front of her solidified into what looked like a three-dimensional chessboard, except it had at least 11 dimensions that she could perceive, and probably more that she couldn't. Pieces that resembled abstract mathematical concepts more than actual game pieces hung in impossible configurations. This is the Nexus game, Voss explained. It is traditionally used to test multi-dimensional strategic thinking among Type Io civilizations. The rules are. Let me guess, Sarah interrupted, studying the board intently. The rules are part of the challenge. We have to figure them out as we play. Incorrect, said Voss. The rules are absolute and will be provided to you in full. The challenge lies in understanding them. A stream of information flooded into the neural interface that had been installed in Sarah's environmental suit. Her mind reeled as it tried to process game mechanics that seemed to violate every principle of logic she knew. Moves could be made backwards in time. Pieces existed in quantum superposition until observed. Some moves could only be made if they were mathematically proven to be impossible. This is, Sarah paused, searching for the right word. Insane. It is perfectly logical, corrected a council member who appeared to be made of living mathematics. Your species simply lacks the cognitive framework to perceive its elegance. Sarah felt a familiar spark of irritation. She'd heard similar dismissals of human capability throughout her time at the Institute. With respect, she said, reaching out to touch one of the game pieces, I think you're confusing complexity with advancement. The piece responded to her touch, splitting into multiple quantum states. The council members shifted slightly, the equivalent of raising eyebrows. Explain, commanded Voss. You've built this game on the assumption that more complex equals more advanced, Sarah said, continuing to experiment with the pieces. But evolution doesn't work that way. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most elegant. Sometimes complexity is just complexity. She stepped back from the board, her mind racing. You know what this reminds me of? The history of Earth computers. Everyone thought quantum computing would completely replace classical computing. But it didn't, because sometimes you don't need quantum superposition to solve a problem. Sometimes you just need a good algorithm. Sarah began to move pieces on the board, but not according to the rules she'd been given. Instead, she was creating her own pattern, her own logic. Candidate Chen, Voss's voice held a warning tone. You are not following the established protocols. No, Sarah agreed. I'm not, because the protocols themselves are part of the problem. You've created rules so complex that understanding them becomes more challenging than actually playing the game. That's not advancement. That's just showing off. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. Sarah continued, her hands moving faster now. Look at this board. You've got pieces moving through time, quantum states that collapse based on mathematical proofs. 11 dimensions of movement. But why? What problem does this actually solve? It demonstrates mastery of advanced cognitive principles, stated the mathematics forum council member. Does it? Sarah challenged. Or does it just demonstrate mastery of unnecessary complexity? She gestured at the pattern she'd created on the board. I can achieve the same strategic depth with half the dimensions and none of the time travel. Watch. She began to play against herself, using her simplified version of the game. The pieces moved in patterns that were complex but comprehensible, creating strategies that emerged from elegance rather than confusion. "Impossible," whispered one of the council members. "She's reduced a Type IO civilization cognitive challenge to something a human can understand." Sarah completed the thought, "without losing any of its essential complexity, because there's a difference between being advanced and being needlessly complicated." The board between them flickered, as if uncertain which rule set it should follow. Sarah pressed her advantage. "You want to test intelligence. Test our ability to simplify the complex, not our ability to complicate the simple. That's what consciousness evolved to do, to find patterns in chaos, to make the incomprehensible comprehensible." High Examiner Voss rose from their seat, their silver form towering over Sarah. "You have not simply broken the rules, Candidate Chen. You have questioned the very foundation upon which they were built." Sarah held her ground. "Yes, and isn't that exactly what science is supposed to do?" The chamber fell silent except for the hum of quantum processors working overtime to process what they'd just witnessed. Sarah waited, wondering if she'd finally pushed too far, challenged too many assumptions. Finally, Voss spoke again. "Prepare yourself, Candidate Chen. The final trial awaits, and after what you have shown us here, it will need to be something entirely new. Human intuition." The examination chamber morphed once again, but this time into something utterly unexpected. Emptiness. The quantum visualizations faded, the complex machinery disappeared, and even the council members seemed to recede into shadow. Sarah found herself standing in what appeared to be an infinite white void. "Your final trial," Voss's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, "is simplicity itself." A single object appeared before Sarah, floating at eye level. It looked like a child's puzzle box, made of some material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its surface was completely smooth, without any visible means of opening it. "Inside this container," Voss continued, "is the answer to a question your species has been asking since it first gained consciousness. Your task is to open it." Sarah circled the floating box cautiously. "That's it. Just open it." "Just open it," confirmed Voss. "You have 1 hour." Sarah reached out and touched the box. It felt neither hot nor cold, neither smooth nor rough. It was as if her fingers were touching the idea of a surface rather than a surface itself. "Can I ask questions?" she ventured. "You may," replied Voss, "but consider carefully whether more information is what you truly need." Sarah withdrew her hand, thinking. The council had consistently tested her ability to think beyond conventional frameworks. This had to be another such test. But how? "Has anyone ever opened it before?" she asked. "Yes." "How many?" 372 beings across all known civilizations. Sarah paced around the box, and they all found the same answer inside. A pause. "No." That made Sarah stop. "What do you mean, no? How can they find different answers in the same box?" "That," said Voss, "is an excellent question." Sarah felt a familiar excitement building, the sensation she got when she was on the verge of understanding something important. "Okay, let me think this through." The box contains the answer to a fundamental question. Different beings have opened it and found different answers. Either the box changes its contents for each person, or... She trailed off, a new possibility forming in her mind. Or the answer isn't in the box at all. The answer is in how we choose to open it. The silence from the council felt encouraging. Sarah continued thinking aloud. "You said this was a question we've been asking since gaining consciousness. What's the most fundamental question conscious beings ask?" She looked at the box with new understanding. "We ask why. Why are we here? Why does anything exist? Why do we ask why?" Sarah laughed suddenly. "The box isn't a container. It's a mirror. It shows us how we approach the unknowable. Some beings probably tried to analyze it scientifically. Others might have approached it spiritually. Some might have tried to break it open by force. And they all found different answers because they were really finding themselves." She reached out and touched the box again, but this time with a different intention. "I'm not going to try to open you," she said softly. "I'm going to acknowledge that some questions are valuable precisely because they can't be answered." The box began to glow softly. "The pursuit of answers has driven every scientific advancement we've ever made," Sarah continued. "But maybe the most important questions aren't the ones we can answer. Maybe they're the ones that keep us asking, that keep us searching and wondering and imagining." The box's glow intensified. "I choose not to open it," Sarah announced firmly, "because the moment we think we have a final answer to life's fundamental questions, we stop looking for new possibilities, and that would be the greatest loss of all." The box rose higher in the air, its glow becoming almost blindingly bright. Then, without any flash or sound, it simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but as if it had never been there at all. The chamber gradually returned to its normal state. The council members reappeared, but they seemed different somehow, more focused, more present. "In all the history of this test," Voss said slowly, "no one has ever refused to open the box." "Did I fail?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Quite the opposite," said the plasma-formed council member. "You demonstrated something we had not considered. The most advanced answer might be recognizing which questions should remain unanswered. Your species is young," Voss added, "but you possess something that many older civilizations have lost: the ability to embrace uncertainty as a virtue rather than a problem to be solved." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "So what happens now?" "Now," said Voss, and Sarah could have sworn she heard excitement in their usually neutral voice, "we begin the real work. Your perspective has opened up possibilities we had not considered in millennia. The galaxy may never be the same." The chamber's doors opened, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity, filled with mysteries waiting to be explored, not to be solved, but to be wondered at, questioned, and cherished for their very unknowability. Sarah stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever came next. After all, not knowing was what humans did best. A new perspective. The news spread across the galaxy at superluminal speeds, transmitted through quantum networks that connected thousands of civilizations. A human, a member of a species that had barely mastered interstellar travel, had not only survived the Nexus Institute's ultimate trials, but had fundamentally challenged their very foundations. Sarah stood at the window of her new laboratory, watching the 3 suns of Centauri Prime paint the sky in impossible colors. Behind her, teams of researchers from dozens of species worked together, their previous hierarchical distinctions forgotten in the excitement of exploration. Candidate Chen, or should I say, Professor Chen, High Examiner Voss materialized beside her, their silver form reflecting the sunset. "The initial results from your human intuition integration protocols are remarkable." Sarah smiled, watching a group of crystalline Algorians working alongside a collective of gaseous Mirians, their different approaches to problem-solving creating solutions neither could have achieved alone. "We're not trying to replace logic with intuition," she explained. "We're finding ways to let them enhance each other." "Indeed." Voss's form rippled with what Sarah had learned to recognize as enthusiasm. "Your suggestion to incorporate human-style creative breaks into our research methodologies was met with skepticism initially, but the results—" "Sometimes you have to stop thinking about a problem to solve it," Sarah said. "Humans learned that through millions of years of evolution, our brains work on problems even when we're not consciously focusing on them." A holographic display materialized between them, showing the latest data from their joint research projects. Traditional quantum computing systems were being revolutionized by the integration of human-inspired neural networks. The rigid structures of galactic academic thought were being transformed by the introduction of Earth-style brainstorming sessions and cross-disciplinary collaboration. "The Council has received requests from 17 different civilizations," Voss announced, "all seeking to establish human education exchange programs. They wish to learn not just what we know, but how we think." Sarah turned from the window to face the laboratory. The room was chaos by traditional Nexus standards. Whiteboards covered in equations next to holographic displays, physical models beside quantum simulations, researchers arguing passionately about possibilities that would have been dismissed as illogical just months ago. "You know what the real breakthrough was?" Sarah asked rhetorically. It wasn't any single discovery or innovation. It was getting everyone to accept that different types of intelligence aren't better or worse. They're just different, and when you combine them. She gestured at a nearby workstation where a young human intern was explaining the concept of metaphors to a bewildered but fascinated group of silicon-based life forms. When you combine them, you get something entirely new. "The galaxy is changing," Voss observed. Some would say too quickly. "Change is what humans do best," Sarah replied. "We've had to. Our planet, our history, our very existence has been one constant adaptation after another. We learned to embrace change because we had no choice." A soft chime echoed through the laboratory, the signal for the daily meditation break, another human practice that had been integrated into the Institute's schedule. The researchers began to step away from their work, some moving to designated quiet areas, others gathering in small groups for discussion. "There are still those who resist these changes," Voss noted, "who believe we are compromising thousands of years of established methodology." Sarah watched as an Algorian researcher showed a human colleague how to perceive 11-dimensional space, while the human taught them how to approach problems through analogy and metaphor. "They're right," she said. "We are compromising their methodology. We're also compromising ours. That's how we grow." The final sun was setting now, casting long shadows through the laboratory. But unlike in the past, the work wouldn't stop with the darkness. Humans had brought their restless energy to the Nexus Institute, their constant drive to push boundaries, to ask what if, to challenge the impossible. "The Council has approved your proposal," Voss said suddenly. "The Nexus Institute will establish its first Earth campus next year. We will bring our knowledge to your world, as you have brought your perspective to ours." Sarah felt a surge of excitement and pride. This was just the beginning. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't their technology or their scientific knowledge. It was their ability to imagine, to dream, to see possibilities where others saw only limitations. "Professor Chen," Voss said, using her new title formally for the first time, "what do you believe comes next?" Sarah looked out at the darkening sky, where the first stars were becoming visible. Somewhere out there, countless civilizations were beginning to look at the universe in new ways, asking questions they'd never thought to ask before, finding answers in places they'd never thought to look. "What comes next?" she repeated, smiling. "That's the best part. We don't know. And not knowing, that's where all the best discoveries begin." The stars twinkled overhead, each one a point of light in the infinite darkness, each one a reminder that the universe was vast enough to contain every kind of intelligence, every kind of wisdom, every kind of wonder. And humanity, young as they were, had earned their place among them, not by being the strongest or the smartest, but by being the ones who never stopped asking why. As the final light faded from the sky, Sarah turned back to her work, ready to face whatever new impossibilities tomorrow might bring. After all, impossible was just another word for something that hadn't been imagined yet.